Back in the 1950s, the Soviet Union hailed a marvel of their innovation, a chic jet-powered airliner, setting the standards as one of the initial aircraft of its kind. This creation soared through the skies at unparalleled speeds and distances, standing as a powerful testament to the capabilities of Soviet engineering. However, amidst the glory, a shadow of mystery enveloped this plane. Over a series of months, there were numerous peculiar and outright strange occurrences involving airliners identical to this one, sparking intrigue and raising eyebrows across the board. These aircraft are experiencing far more than typical crashes. They're being violently catapulted thousands of feet into the air, creating a whirlwind of mystery and urgency among investigators searching for explanations. The 1950s marked the dawn of a new era in commercial aviation, with air travel becoming increasingly safer, swifter, and more comfortable. Those fortunate enough had the luxury of traversing vast continents within a matter of hours, or journeying halfway across the globe in under a day. The aviation industry was basking in its golden age, at least in the Western Hemisphere. In stark contrast, aviation within the Soviet Union presented a radically different picture. Soviet-made airliners lagged significantly behind their Western counterparts, being a generation or two out of date. They were not only slower and smaller, but also lacked considerably in providing passenger comfort. Furthermore, their limited range posed a substantial challenge, particularly in a sprawling country like the Soviet Union. For instance, a flight from Moscow to Vladivostok necessitated a minimum of 6 refueling stops, turning the journey into an exhausting 50-hour ordeal. Passengers had to endure the discomfort of being in cramped, noisy aircraft that flew at lower altitudes, unable to avoid turbulent weather conditions. In the early 1950s, the pressing need for a contemporary and efficient airliner was palpable in the Soviet Union. Instead of merely striving to catch up with the West, they were on the brink of taking a bold leap into a new technological frontier. In 1952, the aviation world was taken by storm when the British unveiled the de Havilland Comet, the world's first jet-powered airliner. This remarkable machine soared at speeds nearly double those of any preceding airliner, climbing 15,000 feet higher into the sky. Its development was a monumental undertaking, demanding years of extensive research and development. Despite jet engines being relatively nascent and untested at the time, it was becoming clear that they represented the future of air travel. Among the visionaries captivated by this innovation was Andrei Tupolev, a renowned Soviet aircraft designer. He recognized the potential of jet engines to revolutionize Soviet aviation, bringing it to the modern era. A jet airliner akin to the Comet could slash flight durations by a third and make air travel accessible on an unprecedented scale. However, the leadership in the Soviet Union had reservations. They perceived jet engines as unreliable, excessively fuel-consuming, and costly, a luxury best suited to the indulgent Western capitalists. Furthermore, the development of the Comet had consumed nearly a decade and millions in resources, an investment of time and money the Soviet authorities were reluctant to make. Despite these challenges, Tupolev was undeterred and came prepared with a strategic plan. Tupolev assured the top Soviet officials that he was capable of delivering a jet-powered airliner within a mere 3 years. His vision was to create a reliable aircraft, boasting a greater passenger capacity than the Comet, yet manufactured at a fraction of the price. Furthermore, a Soviet-engineered jet airliner would serve as tangible proof of the Soviet Union's technological prowess, showcasing to the world that they were on equal footing with the West. It was a proposition too enticing to decline. But the question arose, how could one possibly construct a state-of-the-art jetliner comparable to the Comet in just 3 years? Tupolev had a significant shortcut in mind. His recent work, the Tu-16 bomber, a machine built to unleash destruction over Europe, served as the foundation for his ambitious airliner project. Given that he had just finished designing the bomber for the Soviet Air Force, he believed he was already halfway to the finish line. To transform the bomber into a passenger airliner, Tupolev planned to expand the fuselage. He decided to retain the bomber's engines, despite their lack of efficiency and somewhat noisy operation, because they were readily available. The wings, originally designed for high-speed bombing missions, would also be reused to save valuable engineering time, even though this meant the pilots would have to adapt to landing at higher speeds. Similar considerations apply to the tail and vertical stabilizer, which could largely be repurposed for the new aircraft. Tupolev smartly decided to borrow the landing gear, avionics, and various other components directly from the bomber's assembly line, saving both time and resources. The heavy-duty military-grade parts amounted to a staggering £100,000, resulting in an exceptionally robust airliner. Named the TU-104, this aircraft was designed rapidly and constructed at a minimal cost. As Tupolev was adding the final touches to his creation, it became evident that the shift towards jet aviation was laden with complexities. By 1954, the Comet was embroiled in a series of catastrophic crashes due to its design flaws, leading to its eventual grounding. The aircraft was barred from commercial use for 4 years, leaving investigators to unravel and address the issues. This series of events inadvertently placed the Soviet Union in a unique position. When the TU-104 took to the skies for its maiden test flight in June 1955, the Soviet Union unexpectedly found itself in possession of the world's sole operational jet airliner. Rather than proceeding with caution, the Soviets seized the moment for propaganda gains. In 1956, while the TU-104 was still undergoing flight tests, a delegation of Soviet leaders boldly flew to Britain aboard the new aircraft. The sleek and imposing airliner took many by surprise, especially aviation experts and British journalists who were still grappling with the aftermath of the Comet's grounding. The press was abuzz with speculation, convinced that the Soviets had miraculously surged years ahead of the West, showcasing a design both larger and technologically superior. For the Soviet Union, this turned out to be a tremendous propaganda victory, bolstering their image on the global stage. The show of strength and technological prowess didn't end there for the Soviet Union. In the ensuing months, the TU-104 airliners made grand appearances in cities throughout Europe, each visit greeted by awestruck crowds and dignitaries keen to witness Soviet innovation firsthand. The aircraft even made a historic appearance at the 1957 Paris Air Show, marking the debut of a non-Western-built aircraft at the prestigious event. A few months on, the TU-104 achieved another significant milestone by flying all the way to the United States for a state visit, completing the first ever transatlantic crossing by a jet airliner. To the Soviets, the TU-104 represented a colossal propaganda triumph, and its rapid development from a bomber was hailed as an ingenious stroke of brilliance. However, beneath the surface, the first inklings of trouble were beginning to emerge. Flying the TU-104 proved to be a demanding task. Pilots reported that the aircraft's controls were heavy and unresponsive. Its massive weight and significantly swept wings made low-speed flying a particularly daunting challenge, turning landings at busy civilian airports into nerve-wracking ordeals. Pilots, fearful of stalling the aircraft, often opted to land at higher speeds than the plane was designed for. Coming to a stop presented its own set of problems. The TU-104 lacked air brakes, thrust reversers, and its wheel brakes were inadequately powerful. In many cases, a hastily deployed parachute was the only measure preventing the aircraft from overshooting the runway. Despite these glaring issues, the complaints and concerns raised by the pilots were initially dismissed by the Soviet authorities. It was not until 1958, when the airliner began exhibiting alarming behaviors that were too significant to overlook, that the situation took a more serious turn. The initial indication that something was amiss occurred in February, when a CSA-104 encountered severe turbulence, resulting in both engines experiencing a flameout. The aircraft plummeted 20,000 feet before the pilots, in a state of frenzy, successfully reignited the engines. A mere month later, another 104 faced tumultuous weather. This time, the aircraft was propelled skywards, and the pilots found themselves unable to prevent its ascent to a staggering 44,000 feet, well beyond its safe operational altitude. The aircraft ultimately stalled, and it began a perilous descent back to Earth, though the pilots were eventually able to regain control. Despite these harrowing incidents, Soviet officials were quick to place the blame on the pilots. However, the troubling occurrences persisted. In August, yet another 104 was inexplicably thrust into the sky, resulting in a stall. Tragically, this time, the pilots were unable to recover, leading to a fatal crash. Just 2 months after, a 104 en route from Beijing to Moscow found itself once again catapulted into the air. In a heroic act, the pilot managed to radio back crucial details of the event as it unfolded. While he was unable to save the aircraft and those on board, The information he provided proved invaluable. The Soviet authorities could no longer turn a blind eye to this peculiar string of accidents. It was evident that something was fundamentally wrong with the aircraft. Astonishingly, they opted not to ground the fleet, allowing the 104 to continue its passenger flights even as they scrambled to solve the mystery. Ultimately, investigators came to understand that powerful updrafts, which the pilots were powerless to counteract, were the root cause of the issue. They also realized that the aircraft's lineage as a bomber played a significant role in its troubles. The 104's enlarged pressurized cabin made it susceptible to rearward shifts in its center of gravity, depending on how the aircraft was loaded, contributing to its instability and the challenges faced by the pilots. This inclination for the 104 to pitch upwards during an updraft, coupled with its insufficient power to counteract such forces, often left the pilots without recourse. Following these revelations, a series of urgent modifications were implemented, and restrictions were put in place to limit the aircraft's operational altitude. However, these changes came too late for one more 104, which encountered a potent updraft in 1959. The pilots managed to regain control, but not before the critical design flaw had claimed 144 lives. Despite these modifications, the TU-104 continued to accrue a substantial record of various other accidents, with runway overshoots being particularly common due to the challenges associated with piloting the hefty, bomber-derived aircraft. Astonishingly, nearly 20% of all TU-104s produced would ultimately be lost to accidents. The secretive nature of the Soviet Union meant that these incidents received minimal press coverage, but word of the airliner's troubles still spread, leading to a tarnished reputation among the flying public. The aircraft even became the subject of a folk song in the 1960s. The British and the Soviets both paid a steep price for their early forays into jet travel. By 1958, the de Havilland Comet had undergone extensive redesigns and returned to service, while the Americans had introduced their own jet airliner. Any propaganda value that the TU-104 might once have had rapidly dissipated. Nevertheless, the Soviet Union's first venture into jet-powered aviation played a crucial role in modernizing air travel within the country. The introduction of the jet necessitated updates to air traffic control systems, the construction of new terminals, and the extension of runways throughout the Soviet Union. Moreover, the operational insights gleaned from the TU-104 laid the groundwork for future Soviet aircraft, securing its place in the annals of aviation history as one of the pioneering aircraft of its time.